This is a correspondent from the team, and you're watching this channel. The current war between Israel and Iran didn't just erupt out of nowhere. It's the result of decades of simmering tensions, mistrust, and hostility that have escalated over the years. But what was the immediate trigger, the spark that ignited this powder keg? What caused Israel and Iran to go from shadow war to open military confrontation? To answer that, we need to go back to June 13, 2025. On that day, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a massive multi-pronged airstrike campaign against Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. The strikes were widely seen as an attempt to set Iran's nuclear program back by years and severely weaken its military capabilities. So why did Israel take such drastic action at this particular moment? What prompted this dramatic escalation in the shadow war between Israel and Iran? There are three key factors that provide the immediate context for Israel's decision to go to war. First, let's talk about Iran's nuclear program. For over 2 decades, the Iranian nuclear issue has loomed large over the region and international stage. Israel has long suspected that Iran is pursuing nuclear weapons in violation of international agreements. This suspicion was heightened in 2022 when the UN's atomic energy watchdog, the IAEA, raised the alarm over Iran's increasing stockpile of enriched uranium and its failure to fully cooperate with UN inspections. According to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Iran was now just weeks away from producing enough fissile material for several nuclear bombs. He said Israel had gathered intelligence showing that Iran was carrying out activities to build a nuclear bomb. This includes recently enriching uranium to 84% purity, just shy of the 90% threshold needed for weapons. Another piece of intelligence included Iranian scientists conducting experiments on the high explosive lenses used in nuclear detonators. And another was Tehran stockpiling sophisticated equipment for advanced centrifuges capable of quickly producing weapons-grade uranium. All of this pointed to Iran being on the cusp of developing nuclear weapons. Israel feared that if it didn't act, Iran would eventually break out and acquire the bomb, which would fundamentally alter the regional balance of power and threaten Israel's existence. Second, we have Israel's domestic political situation. In October 2023, mass protests erupted across Israel over the government's proposed judicial reform. While not directly related to foreign policy, these demonstrations put intense pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who faced calls to prioritize domestic issues over the Iranian threat. Some critics argued that Netanyahu was deliberately stoking fears of a war with Iran to rally public support around him amid the domestic backlash. Netanyahu called early elections for October 2025. Going to war with Iran could be seen as a risky gamble to rally public support behind him in the face of mounting domestic opposition. The thinking here is that a successful military operation against Iran could boost his popularity and distract from his handling of the protests. Conversely, a costly war could further galvanize his opponents. Additionally, Netanyahu likely felt compelled to act before his political standing deteriorated even further. Going to war is always a risky gamble, but especially so when you're facing a divided and increasingly restless public. Finally, we need to consider the regional instability. Throughout 2023, diplomatic efforts to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal foundered. Talks between Iran and world powers stalled amid continued Iranian intransigence and mistrust. As diplomacy failed, the only thing that seemed to be growing was Iran's nuclear program. This lack of progress left little room for de-escalation between Israel and Iran. With the possibility of a peaceful resolution fading, Israel felt compelled to take matters into its own hands. It's worth noting that while each of these factors contributed to Israel's decision, none exist in a vacuum. The Iranian nuclear threat was exacerbated by Iran's support for armed groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. These groups along Israel's northern and southern borders made Iran's growing regional influence a direct security concern for Israel. This long-standing animosity and distrust ultimately culminated in the June strike. The shadow war between Israel and Iran had reached a boiling point. After years of escalating tensions, Israel felt compelled to act against Iran's nuclear program for fear of it getting out of control. Domestic political pressures also played a role, as did the breakdown of diplomatic efforts to rein in Iran's nuclear ambitions. The result was a massive surprise attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Now let's rewind a bit to see how this bitter rivalry really began. It is important to understand the deep historical and ideological roots of the conflict between Israel and Iran because they provide crucial context for why these two nations have been locked in a seemingly intractable struggle for decades. The story begins shortly after the Islamic Revolution of 1979 that toppled Iran's US-backed Shah and installed the current supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini in power. Overnight, Iran transformed from a secular monarchy into an Islamic republic. This had profound consequences for Israel. Prior to 1979, Iran was one of Israel's staunchest allies in the Middle East. The two nations had forged strong economic, cultural, and security ties. But the Islamic Revolution turned that relationship on its head. Iran's new revolutionary leaders viewed Israel as a US stooge and a symbol of Western imperialism. They accused Israel of collaborating with the Shah to oppress the Iranian people and vowed to support any group resisting the Zionist entity. This marked a dramatic departure from the pro-Western Iranian regime that had come to power in 1941. For Israel, the rise of a radical anti-Israel regime in a strategic location was deeply troubling. The potential implications for regional stability loomed large. The first major manifestation of post-revolutionary Iran's hostility towards Israel was the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979. This event not only humiliated the United States, but signaled Iran's implacable animosity towards Israel. From Iran's perspective, seizing the U.S. Embassy was part of a broader struggle against global arrogance and imperialism represented by the West. Israel was squarely placed in the crosshairs of this revolutionary fervor. In the following years, Iran's support for militant groups opposing Israel only intensified. Iran provided sanctuary and funding to Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which carried out attacks against Israelis. But Iran's most significant backing went to Hezbollah, which it helped establish in southern Lebanon in the mid-1980s. Over time, Iran essentially transformed Hezbollah from a small local militia to a powerful transnational terror organization. Well versed in guerrilla warfare tactics, Hezbollah became a major thorn in Israel's side, carrying out numerous deadly attacks inside Israel and occupying southern Lebanon. This forced Israel into costly wars with Hezbollah in 2006 and 2007. As if Iran's support for militant groups wasn't provocation enough, Iran also steadfastly refused Israel's right to even exist. For Iran's leaders, Israel is nothing more than a Zionist entity that usurped Palestinian land and must be destroyed. Any notion of a two-state solution is viewed as anathema by Iran, which insists that all of historic Palestine, including modern-day Israel, belongs to Palestinians. For Israel, Iran's refusal to recognize its right to exist and its relentless support for armed groups seeking to destroy Israel are existential threats. Israel sees Iran's growing nuclear program as a red line that cannot be crossed. If Iran acquires the bomb, it would empower Iran-backed groups like Hezbollah and Hamas to blackmail or pressure Israel into submission. The prospect of facing not just conventional, but nuclear-armed adversaries is unacceptable to Israel. But the animosity goes beyond just ideology. There is also a heavy dose of mistrust and animus rooted in centuries of competing claims to the same ancestral land. Both Israelis and Iranians consider ancient figures like Abraham and the patriarch of their respective faiths, and both view Jerusalem as a holy city. Decades of failed peace negotiations have only deepened the divide, leading to a situation where the only thing Israel and Iran seem to agree on is their fundamental disagreement. Now that you understand the context, I can continue the story and tell you how this war is unfolding and what comes next. Just let me know in the comments below. You can also find more breaking news and analysis on our website or by following us on social media.